I love being right. I really do. Because what have I been saying to you for the past, what, 2, 3 weeks now? I've been saying, what's the point of Sunak? What's his point? What's his purpose? What's his reason for being? And especially, what's his reason for being beyond the budget? Because that's the whole reason he was put in the first place, for this budget to try and sort of end the chaos of Liz Truss, to put someone more competent at the helm. But with so many current Tory rebellions brewing open, there's now at least 3 ongoing ones that we know that we've talked about. And I want to do a different video tonight. I really, really did. But I went on a whim. I went on a whim. You know what? I'm just gonna quickly check. I'm just gonna check Conservative Home. And we've talked about Conservative Home before. It is the big flagship UK conservative like think piece. A lot of MPs write for this. It's like meant to be the mouthpiece for the membership of the UK Conservative Party. And even when Conservative Home is asking, what is Sunak for? You know he is in trouble. He is in absolute trouble. And as we said yesterday, he's been given 6 months, and that the May local elections could be very well a bellwether test to decide either whether he loses his premiership or they just trigger a general election. And to be honest, both outcomes are very likely to happen at the same time. But we're going to go diving into this because this is fascinating, because it's one thing to be proved right, but it's another thing entirely to be proved right by people who do not share sometimes your political opinions or sort of your beliefs. So ooh, I feel all warm and tingly inside, I do. So let's get right on into this piece, because this is fascinating. It's a fascinating insight currently into sort of the mindset of the Conservative Party. That's why I look at Conservative Home, just to see what is actually going on internally in the Conservative Party. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a reputation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. So, off we go today, over to, as we said, Conservative Home, where they ask the simple question of, what is Sunak for? So, let's go on into this. So, prime ministers must define themselves. And I agree. They all define themselves in very simple ways. David Cameron was very much a moderate conservatives, bringing in a new levelling up, devolved deal for the country. Liz Truss certainly defined herself as what was meant to be a new direction for the United Kingdom, which, as you may very well know, did not go down well. Boris Johnson defined himself very clearly as the man who got Brexit done. And of course, Theresa May, she was originally going to get Brexit done. That was, believe it or not, her reason for being, but it didn't end up being so. But anyway, let's get back into it. So, prime ministers must define themselves. That is to say, tell a story about why they and their party should be elected, as we've talked about that, how important that is before. Especially if they have no electoral mandate of their own. It's hard for them to do so when they've already well known for other reasons. Liz Truss wasn't and didn't survive in post for long enough to make a difference. Theresa May was the longest serving Home Secretary in over 60 years and came to the Premiership with a reputation. She was able to recast herself partly because of the emergencies of Brexit and partly because of her image making power of Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill, and as a fighter against the burning injustices. She too failed. Boris Johnson had been around in office even longer, having served 2 terms as Mayor of London, the first being before the coalition took office, and most voters wanted to get Brexit done, and with a deal too. He was able to present himself as a man who would deliver both, and did, and he won an election, but ultimately failed in office. Bad luck and judgment played their part. Luck because his government was haunted by COVID and war. Judgment because he saw economics as sort of a Roman circus, a spectacle to entertain the masses, featuring tax cuts, borrowed money, public works, and ideally lots of statues. So certainly that's one way to describe Boris Johnson's premiership. That's certainly one way to describe his premiership. I'll give you that. But back to it. So the storm clouds were already gathering before the Tory dynamite and the flood defences. But even when Johnson's Promethean will couldn't defy economic reality, and his appetite for spending plus the cost of COVID were met by tax rises as well as more borrowing. Now, the man who shares the responsibility is both in number 10. Unlike all 3 of his recent Conservative predecessors, he comes into office with that economic hurricane raging. The good news for him is that his poll ratings run ahead of his party's, and that's about it. Update on that, by the way, those poll numbers. Over the weekend, those poll numbers seem to have started plateauing very quickly. The, quote, Sunak bounce has not been a very long one. It has not been a very long one at all, given the recent numbers. Indeed, there is maybe some suggestions that those poll numbers may be even going to start falling again. But back to it. So, he has entered Downing Street during a 4th Conservative-led term of government. There is no precedent in modern times for a 5th. And when Truss became Prime Minister, the Tories lagged behind Labour in political poll of polls by 31% to 42%. She then crashed the car, and by the time he succeeded her, the party's relative scores were 24% to 25%. Sunak had barely dented Labour's lead. No wonder there is no credible alternative to tax rises and spending cuts, since the markets are now the real government. And last when it comes to economic policy, and when troubles come, they come not in single spies, etc. Yeah. He's in a world of trouble, Sunak, and even the writer here for this piece knows it. You can feel it just dripping off the page. Now remember, this is like, as we said before at the beginning, the home of like what the modern sort of outer conservative, non-parliamentary party is meant to be. This is meant to be like their mouthpiece, what it was set up to be. Who regularly sort of poll like conservative membership. Wherever you see those, most of the time it is done by this group. And not only that, to show how powerful they actually are, they were the last big flagship sponsor of the last Conservative Party conference. That is how important Conservative Home is. So I just want to make sure you understand exactly the strength and words and the sheer venom that is coming off this page and how serious a problem Sunak really is in. So back to it. Norman Lehman's verdict on the John Major government was that it gave the impression of, quote, being in office but not in power. So it is for Sunak today. Problems come fast in modern government, and it seems to be a short amount of convincing solutions to small boats, to higher migration, to the end time style fanatics of just stop oil. even to the Welcome Collections exhibition closure. The museum is shutting down its, quote, Medicine Man exhibition, which was been open for 15 years because of its, quote, racist, sexist, and ableist theories and language. The Welcomes collection says that it, quote, generally doesn't receive government grants, so you may say what it does is none of the government's business. Yeah, it really isn't. If it wants to shut down an exhibition, then it may very well do that. So, but a weird tangent to go on. And by the way, that's weird. But that you can see, by the way, they're desperately trying to engage in culture war stuff. And I've always said culture war stuff doesn't seem to have gone over well with the UK conservative public, as well as it does certainly with the American conservative public. So yeah, they're trying, but they're failing, which is, to be honest, in my books, is a good thing. But anyway, back to it. This isn't how many conservative members and voters will see the matter. They will ask, why, after 12 years of Tory-led government, isn't the country more conservative? Gee, I wonder why. Kimmy Badenoch's popularity with activists during the summer's leadership contest, according to our surveys and YouGov poll surveys, was driven by the sense that she was the candidate who felt their most discontent. Sunak has avoided the self-harm of the Truss and Johnson eras, at least so far, and there has been no, quote, alleged gatherings on government premises, COVID style in the words of the Sue Gray report, and whatever may be said of Hunt's autumn statement didn't blow the roof off the laboratory, as Kersey Quitang's mini-budget did. He may want the red wall-focused action from ministers, of which the set is a centerpiece of stopping the small boats, but the core of his government is provided by blue-faced type MPs, such as Oliver Dowden, Jeremy Quinn, and in the Cabinet Office for the Centre of Government, John Glenn, plus Hunt himself at the Treasury. The danger for Sunak is that the managerialism isn't enough, that a, quote, Tory destructive spiral sets in, that the events come thick and fast, that Tory rebels grow bolder, ditto Nigel Farage, that MPs' resentments mount, that media then pick off ministers one by one, Dominic Raab being the current present target, and that the Conservative poll ratings stay in their present damaging, desperate range. And that does seem to be happening. We do seem to be seeing what is essentially a Conservative death spiral, because rebels are already trying to go after for Jeremy Hunt's job in the next cabinet reshuffle. They want to get rid of Jeremy Hunt because they suspect him of Brexit heresy. And they are going to certainly potentially win because Sunak is weak. He will have to give in. And yeah, it's going to be just a spiral because once you give in to one set of rebels, the other rebels are going to want something as well. You've got 3 ongoing rebellions at the moment. It does not look good. But anyway, back to it. Simons-Clark onshore wind amendment to the Levelling Up Bill seems to be a response to Theresa Villa's housing targets one. Whether your view of both Conservative rebellion plainly isn't dead, it's a good thing for the Commons that MPs may argue those matters out on the floor of the House, but it's plainly bad for Tory unity. That Clark's amendment is, quote, backed by Truss and Johnson too, hasn't been lost on Sunak's supporters, who claim that the recent scores are being paid. 12 Conservative MPs have said that they are standing down, and more will follow. The most striking announcement of the weekend was Devona Davidson. The Red Wall minister has been an MP for fewer than 3 years. And remember, she is the star. She is one of the star Red Wall Tory MPs. And she's stepping down. Fewer than 3 years. 12 MPs have already decided they are stepping down at the next election. That is how sure they are potentially going to lose the next election. And that is one thing that is seemed to be in the Conservative Party, that they are going to lose the next election. So if they are going to lose the next election, why should I show any loyalty or even support to Sunak. And thus, Sunak cannot control his own party, even though he has a big working majority. But back to it. So, the curse of leader writers is mistaken the confidence in their own views. I'm doubtless that is no less prone to it than any others, but my self-awareness runs dry as I stare at the very foreboding landscape. Lord Afcross writes on the Conservative Home today that while voters may have seen the advent of Sunak as a return to sanity, they do not regard it as a fresh start. Perhaps that's all that can be said usefully to be said. Maybe the Prime Minister should simply shrug his shoulders and accept that his political fate is to be a firefighter, and that any attempt to frame a different mission or even send a bigger message would be shot down by the lobby with a single feared obliterating word: relaunch. Would it do Sunak? It would do Sunak no good to read an, quote, an embattled Prime Minister seeking to salvage his beleaguered government. Can he tell a story about himself that can cut through to the voters, whose words of him have already featured the words of non-dom, green card, and, quote, differently rich? He doesn't seem to be well placed to cast himself as a champion of the NHS, nor is his most rewarding times for him to push the main theme of his Myers lecture as Chancellor, with which William Atkinson wrote on this site at the very end of last week. Better productivity and no temporary surge, even driven by higher unemployment, would mean no real success. As William pointed out, Hunt borrowed Sunak's line from the lecture about wanting to make Britain the new Silicon Valley. There is an aspiration that runs true to character, but it is too niche, and I suspect to have much voter impact, even when backed up with all the budget research and development money. The Prime Minister is a creation of the Trinity that delivers less demand for government: a stable family, good education, and rewarding work. He is already waist deep in the work part of the triangle as the government tries to wrestle with war and an NHS crisis and recession. Families policy is neglected ground, and that may be more for him in education. His parents clearly prized it, so will he. May and Johnson's governments tried to work hard in this space where education and work met: the apprenticeships, the T levels, the lifelong loan entitlement. There is more for Sunak and the Conservatives here. So obviously this is very much a call for Sunak, please, for the love of God, please do something on education. You know, it is potentially the only area where you could do it, and at least maybe win at least some ground. But honestly, I think, shall we say, the judgment on Sunak has been well and truly delivered. I think, you know, as it said there, that his fate is to be a firefighter, to be the man who loses the next general election. That is to be Rishi Sunak's legacy. And even as a firefighter, as we are seeing from these rebellions, they are wanting to, you know, extract concessions and make their will heard, and it's fueling the fire of this conservative civil war that has been nothing but pure kindling, a couple of, you know, bright, you know, sparks and flashes every so often, but he's never really taken hold. But once they're out of power, oh boy, will the Conservatives go to war? Absolutely, because at that point there is nothing any potential leader can do to keep these factions quiet. They can't give them cabinet positions. They can't appoint them to, you know, chair committees or anything like that. They have no goodies to give out. And as a result, they will fight like cats and dogs. And if you think they are fighting now, wait until they are out of power, because oh boy, will they fight. So, as always, you know, Yeah, thanks for watching, but I'll tell you now, I don't think Sunak's got long. I think, as we just heard, talked about just a couple of days ago, 6 months, the May's local elections will deliver the verdict on what happens to Sunak. So it's very likely next year we'll be going for a general election. I think I still very much think that. I really, really do. And this just reinforces the whole thing that I've been trying to tell you for the past, couple of weeks now. What's the point of Rishi Sunak beyond the budget? He seems to have no control over his party. He can't seem to stamp his authority. You've got MPs who are clearly abandoning ship, especially when you've got what was cast as the star recruit of the Red Wall leaving. She's barely been an MP for 3 years and she's leaving already. And like I say, if the mood that seems to set in the Conservative Party is we're going to lose the next election anyway, so why should I be loyal or support Rishi Sunak? Death spiral. That's what's going to happen, and it's going to get even worse once they lose. Oh boy, is it going to get worse when they lose. But yeah. So as always, guys, like I say, thank you very much for watching. Like I say, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and one after link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.